Well, welcome to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast, and this is an episode in our Young Leaders series. And I brought on my Young Leaders co-host with me today, Miss Kiley Pagel. Welcome back, Kiley.
Hi, Peggy. Thank you for having me.
And Kiley, I have challenged you with choosing a guest and hosting this interview of this Young Leaders series. And it's because this Young Leaders series is really targeted toward individuals in their professional careers or dairy producers that are looking for how they can relate to others that are where they're at in the industry. And that's you. You're in that space. You are working at the dairy on a regular basis, on a day-to-day basis. And just to reintroduce yourself a little bit to the podcast, take a minute and tell us a little bit about your role at Pagel Ponderosa.
Yes, my name is Kiley Pagel, like Peggy said, and I work at Pagel Family Businesses, which is my family's dairy farm. I'm the fourth generation there at the dairy, and my day-to-day roles are kind of insane sometimes. I sit as our marketing advisor, but I do also work closely in HR at some of our sites, and I also am working with dairy comp and cow data entry, so my day-to-day is a little different every day. But it's always a lot of fun and a joy, of course.
So people side, cow side, data entry, marketing, you touch a lot of different spaces in what you do. And you also gotten to meet some pretty incredible people that have come through the doors at the dairy at Pagel's Ponderosa. And one of those is who you've chosen to be your guest today. So why don't you tell us who's our guest today?
So today we will be meeting with Dr. Megan Abeyta, and I was very fortunate to meet Dr. Megan when she came in our doors at Pagel's Ponderosa Dairy to intern with my family farm for about a month she was with us. And in that time, I didn't get to directly work with Megan very often, but she was always in the atmosphere of different things that I was doing in my day-to-day. So I got to meet her, get to know her, and through the time and knowing her, we grew a relationship. And with that relationship, I have known her, and she is somebody that I've watched grow in many different aspects in her own. And I look up to her dearly by what she's done, and I think she has an amazing story to tell.
So a role model and a mentor for you personally, Dr. Megan Abeyta. And so that is who you're going to be hearing from today in our Young Leader series here on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast with my guest host, Kiley Pagel. Quality Branding Solutions is a comprehensive branding solutions partner that empowers businesses, schools, and organizations in the dairy industry and beyond through impactful brand products, designs, and imprints. Find out how Sue Heim and the team at Quality Branding Solutions can help you turn your dairy business into a recognized brand at qualityinc.com or click on the link in the show note.
Thank you, Megan, for joining me today. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us some background on yourself and kind of your education that you have.
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Fort Collins, Colorado. I didn't have any ag experience at all, but found my way into dairy nutrition. Went to Iowa State University for 9 years. I got my undergrad in animal science there and then found dairy along the way. I worked at the dairy farm as a research assistant for Dr. Lance Baumgard at the time, my junior year, and I really loved his nutrition class. So ended up staying on for graduate school, started off getting my master's and ended up switching to a PhD about 3 semesters in. And then, here I am. It took me 5 years to get my PhD, and then I became a nutritionist after that. So
that is amazing. So where are you working now? What are you doing?
Yep. So I am an independent dairy nutritionist with GPS Dairy Consulting. So we all have our own LLCs, but we work together as a team and under the GPS umbrella. And so I service farms all over Wisconsin. So I'm an active dairy nutritionist now, feeding cows all over the state. So
perfect. So you said you kind of found dairy along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that experience. You found finding dairy, finding agriculture, and what made you want to stay.
Yeah. So like I said, I didn't grow up in ag. It was very foreign to me. I was super naive, didn't even know you could have a job in agriculture without being a farmer, to be quite frank. When I was in high school, I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian, like every little girl that likes animals, right? And my sophomore year of high school, I interned at a veterinary clinic. Surprise, surprise, I hated it. It just wasn't my thing. And so I had to complete so many internship hours and ended up interning at a sheep ranch my junior year of high school, about 60 head in Loveland, Colorado. And again, had no clue what I was doing, but somehow the sheep ranch owners left me there by myself. They basically just said, hey, feed the sheep every day. We'll be back in a week. We've already pre-weighed all the feed. All you got to do is feed them. I was like, oh, yeah, sure. I had a really crappy car at the time, and a giant snowstorm came, and I got trapped at the farm. And I went out to the barn and learned some life lessons about barometric pressure and how that impacts sheep and when they give birth. And so all the sheep started giving birth in the barn, and I'm sure I contacted the owners. I don't remember, but what I do remember is being on Google and typing, like, what do you do when a sheep starts giving birth? And then learned about how you need to dry them off and keep it warm and all that stuff. And so that was quite the adventure. But what really sparked my interest in agriculture was that despite them giving birth, there was one where a tail was sticking out, and I didn't know much at the time, but I knew that it was wrong, right? Now I know that was a breech, of course, and I was on Google again. I'm like, what do you do when it's coming out backwards? And I learned basically that the lamb could die if I didn't intervene. So I ended up spending 45 minutes chasing this sheep around by myself, desperate, never seen anything give birth in my life. And I managed to halter it, tie it up, and I pulled the lamb. I was like, I had to put my hand where? As a 16-year-old city kid. But yeah, I pulled the lamb, and it lived, and the owners were super excited. And they're like, oh, we rarely have breached lambs, so it's incredible that this happened. And that was probably what inspired my whole journey start into agriculture, but again, still super naive, didn't know you could have a job in it. So when I went to Iowa State for college, I started off as wildlife. So quickly changed. I think it only took me a couple months to realize there was animal science as a major. And then I worked at the vet school. I worked with every species that I could. I worked with pigs and poultry and dogs and rabbits, rats, the whole thing. Ended up working in dairy at the Iowa State Dairy Farm simply because Dr. Lance Baumgard was teaching me his nutrition class. He was like, I'm going to hire you. You're going to go muck stalls and milk cows and do the thing. And that's what I was doing. I was getting up at 5 every day and milking cows. And I really liked the cows. I liked the concept of making milk and really loved the graduate students. And the science was very intriguing to me. And I liked how when you make a change, you can see the impact of that change right away with milk production, whereas other types of species, it just takes more time to see the impacts on growth. So I liked all of those things, and I guess that's kind of what got me hooked, on top of really loving cheese and ice cream. So,
Well, we are so happy to have you, and what a unique and pretty much one-of-a-kind story of how you got into the industry. So, it's been a long time kind of figuring out what you're going to do and kind of where you are now. What was the biggest challenge that you've faced in your career so far?
I would say both a challenge and a positive thing would be that I didn't come from an ag background. The more people I tell my story to, the more they're like, yeah, there's a lot more people like you coming into the industry, and we need that because it's a different perspective. In my role as a dairy nutritionist, I have also found it to be a challenge, simply because there's a lot of flow on the farm that I just wasn't exposed to. And so I feel like my learning curve was a lot steeper coming out of graduate school, which wasn't practical. It was more physiology based. So that's a little bit of a challenge, at least for the first few years. It was more difficult to get integrated in, and having conversations on farm about the practical stuff that didn't have to do with nutrition necessarily. I found that to be one of the largest challenges that I have faced. So, yeah.
So yeah, there's some positive and some negative to
Absolutely.
it, but how have you been working to overcome those challenges?
I think I've spent a lot of time just trying to get to know people and asking questions. Like I said, I interned at Pagel's Ponderosa when I first got out of graduate school, and that was tremendously helpful, right? So I try to put myself in a position where I'm physically doing the job so that I can understand the ins and outs of it when I can. But yeah, interning at Pagel's was super helpful. Having relationships with farmers, and then also my team is outstanding at GPS. They all are very open to answering my questions, and yeah, I would say that that's the biggest thing, right? Like, nose to the grind, just get it done. Just because you don't know doesn't mean you can't learn. And I've come a really long way, so I certainly am not where I started. But yeah, I would say that's it, being open to asking questions.
I think that is a great way to look at it, and asking more and more questions. While people may not always be willing to answer all the time, you're going to get that answer one way or another.
Absolutely.
If you could take a look back and give some advice to 20-year-old Megan, what would it be?
I would say learn Spanish. I wish I never had quit Spanish classes in high school. It certainly would help me a lot today. But in addition to that, being a young woman that didn't grow up in agriculture, I was pretty intimidated about going into the field of nutrition, because not that women can't do it and that there aren't successful women out there, but it is a very male-dominated industry, which is okay. I just was really intimidated about my personality and how am I going to fit in. And so what I've learned over time is that the more authentic I am to myself, the more the easier it is, right? And in fact, farmers are more drawn to that authenticity and just being real. And I've had a lot more success doing that than anything else. So if I were to give advice to my 20-year-old self, I'd say, don't worry about that stuff. Just be you. You've got skills, you've got a knowledge to bring to the table, and that's going to bring you far. And just don't worry about that. Everyone's super nice and accommodating in agriculture, and I've really hardly had any issues with what I had scared myself into believing was true.
Well, that is perfect. And I think great advice that everybody should probably give themselves in some capacity or another. And we've had a lot of talk so far, and we can definitely see that you have many talents that you have found from working with sheep to now working with dairy cattle. With that talent that you have, you could take that to many different industries. Who or what inspired you to really hone in on the dairy industry and really helped you figure out where you are in your career and helped out with that?
Yeah. I mean, on top of the sheep experience, of course, in ag in general, but I think nutrition always interested me as a topic. But then the reason that I wanted to become a dairy nutritionist rather than an academia, a professor researching nutrition at a university, I chose nutrition because I saw other nutritionists with their boots on the ground and they're able to help farmers with problems they're dealing with every single day. In fact, I met a GPS consultant who's no longer with GPS today, but her name was Helen Korzek. And I remember I was in college and I, again, had this idea that to be a nutritionist, I had to have grown up on a farm, and a young woman was maybe another small barrier that I had thought was true. But when I saw her and I met her, and she had a personality a little bit similar to mine, at least, and I saw her being successful, and I was like, I think that I can do this too. And I really was drawn to, again, being boots on the ground with the farmers, solving problems as they come, and then using the research and the skills that I had developed in graduate school to be able to translate the science into something that's practical for farmers to use today. So I think that seeing her, my colleague Brady Gates, he knew he wanted to be a nutritionist, and I really liked the way he talked about nutrition. And so I think those things inspired me a lot, and the job is very dynamic. It enables me to use a lot of different skill sets, and I'm certainly not bored. Every day is different. I like that you can go driving and visit farms someday. Other days you're balancing rations or reading science in the office, or you're taking samples or whatever that may be. I like how dynamic the job is.
That is amazing. Sounds like you had a lot of great different individuals that kind of helped pave the way for you. And it's always nice to have a couple people that stand out because they all are offering you something different than the other, which is always amazing. You have not a lot of time, like spare time. You seem to be all over doing everything. So, what are some resources that you find helpful that help you just be Megan and help you in your professional career, whether that's books, podcasts,
Sure.
conferences? What helps Megan?
Yeah, I would say obviously we spend a lot of time on the road, but I would say I spend a lot of time listening to podcasts. So like the Balkan podcast is really helpful. I, of course, keep up with the science and nutrition podcasts. And then there's also personal podcasts as well. And then my team is outstanding. We have a Teams group that we all communicate with every single day. So if I have questions, I'll just throw it on the Teams chat, and then everybody, wherever they are, can respond. And I think having that generational knowledge is invaluable as somebody who's starting out in nutrition. Because certainly I know what I'm doing to some extent, but there's nothing that can replace years of experience, right? I certainly utilize them all the time, and they're all very fantastic and accommodating. And another resource I use is industry reps. There's a lot of tech support people with a lot of different companies that are very good at what they do, and they're very supportive, and they're all very available all the time. And so I would say the people in this community are, again, extremely accommodating, and everybody wants to see everyone succeed, and I really appreciate that.
That's amazing. You mentioned the podcasts.
Yep.
Are there any podcasts that really stand out to you, whether it's related to the nutrition side, industry side, personal side, that really mean something to you? What are some of those? And if you could tell us a little bit about them.
Sure. I actually really enjoy the Balkan Real Science Exchange podcast. I think that because I got my PhD, maybe I'm a little more attached to, I know these people sometimes by name, and so it's fun to listen to them talk about the latest science. I like to use data when I'm making decisions on farms because you can get overwhelmed with how many different products there are and how many different things are involved in what impacts nutrition. So I really appreciate that they take the time to translate that science into something that's usable for myself. There's also, of course, the GPS Dairy Cast. We try to translate all of our resources so that they're, again, easily applicable on farms so that people can drive value from that. On the personal side, I really enjoy the Diary of a CEO. I really enjoy that podcast. The topics are variable. It's a lot more about human health and also finances. And since we have our own businesses here at GPS, I'm learning a lot about running my own business, but also interested in, of course, side income. And I think that podcast is a lot of fun to listen to because it just gives me ideas that I didn't have before about finances and my health. So this whole thing about dumbbells in my truck was inspired by that podcast because they were talking all about how important muscle is for longevity. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to get better at
See, that's
exercising.
such a silly thing. You got it from somewhere.
Exactly.
All seem like great resources. I'll have to take a look at some. You are with GPS, and like you said, you're almost self-employed. But if you hadn't found GPS in your time,
Sure.
what were you looking for, even from graduating college?
Culture is super important to me. In Lance's lab group, we had a really great culture and we all worked together towards a common goal. And I am more of a social, extroverted person, so I drive a lot of value off of team interactions. And I felt in grad school that because we all had this common goal and we were all suffering together and we all accomplished these things together, I drew a lot of satisfaction from that. So when I'm looking for an employer, I'm also looking for a team that, again, has that common goal that we're all feeding into. Well, even though we're all doing our own thing, I find that to be highly motivating. And a team that is supportive of each other's growth and open to discuss the rights, the wrongs, the what I tried, hey, this does work, this didn't work. And I think that we can all grow from that. So I would say culture is the most important thing to me because, again, I personally drive so much value from being part of a successful team.
I think that is a great answer. What kind of mentorship do you wish you had? It seems like you had a great one through Dr. Lance, but is there anything else that you feel like you may have missed out on or through mentorship, or maybe if you hadn't had Dr. Lance, what do you think you were looking for?
So if I were to try to find, or if I was looking for another mentor, for example, and this is more of a time restriction than people being willing to do it, right? I would have loved to have had more experience working on farms. I can consider you guys, like the Pagels Ponderosas, kind of my mentorships in regards to farmers themselves. But I would have loved to have been able to work on a farm and have a boss or mentor, for lack of a better term, for that day-to-day farm stuff that goes on every day.
Is there anything else that maybe a question I haven't asked or something else that you just want to mention? Do you have any?
I guess just advice in general to young people coming into the agriculture career. I think doing things that make you uncomfortable is really good for you. You're gonna be successful as long as you apply yourself. And I think that some of the fears and anxiety that I had about being a nutritionist, I was proven totally wrong. And I'm so glad every single day that I just took the step to do the scary thing because the relationships that I've developed and the success that I've had on farms, just knowing like, hey, I can get milk out of these cows and I actually know what I'm doing. That's very exciting and satisfactory. And if I had just let my anxiety prevent me from taking that step, and if I would have gone with what was more comfortable, because I was more comfortable with the academia world, I think I would have regretted not what could have been, because I'm sure it would have been satisfactory in academia as well, but I would have always wondered what if. And so I think if somebody is struggling with a little bit of intimidation, because this job can be intimidating, especially for a young person fresh out of school with no ag background, it's a competitive space. Just take the shot. When you're young, you've got time. If it's not the right move, that's all right. There's so much time you can change to another position or whatever that may be, but don't regret not trying just because it's uncomfortable. I think that's where you're going to experience the most growth, but also the most satisfaction in life. And I don't regret it at all. So I'm really happy with where I'm at.
Wonderful. I think that is great advice. And to everybody that take those chances because you never know what the outcome may be. Well, Megan, I would like to thank you for joining me today. It is always truly a pleasure to just have chats with you. So thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.